Recently, The Atlantic did a really fascinating piece on what they consider to be the cheapest generation. Now, I might disagree with their assessment, but there were some really interesting tidbits here on millennials and whether or not they should be considered the cheapest generation. Now, there's a lot of talk about the economic recovery and how millennials aren't really playing a role because they're not buying anything. They're not buying cars, they're not buying houses. It might be because a lot of them are dealing with a significant amount of student loan debt, stagnant wages, underemployment, a lot of problems that the generation before us didn't necessarily have to deal with, right? Well, there's also a shift in mentality and the thought process of what makes you happy, what is the American dream, what should you strive for? So let me give you some really interesting statistics to start this off. Today's young people simply don't drive like their predecessors did. In 2010, adults between the ages of 21 and 32 bought just 27% of all new vehicles sold in America, down from the peak of 38% in 1985. Even the proportion of teenagers with a license fell by 28% between 1998 and 2008. So look, I think about my personal experience. As soon as I was 16, I got that license. I wanted to drive, but less teenagers are actually going out there and doing it. And I think a lot of it might have to do with, feeling as though you're not going to have access to the funds to get a car. It's just not as accessible as it was before. Since World War II, new cars and suburban houses have powered the economy and propelled recoveries. Millennials may have lost interest in both. So here's what's going on. Millennials have turned against both cars and houses in dramatic historic fashion. Just as car sales have plummeted along with their age cohort, the share of young people getting their first mortgage between 2009 and 2011 is half what it was just 10 years ago, according to the Federal Reserve study.
Okay, but if you got to look at the timing of that between 2009 and 2011, that was right after the economy crashed. And
I know.
And you can't get loans now.
That's true. So that was the reasoning that economists used before. But now they're realizing that even though the economy has recovered quite a bit and millennials are starting to make a little more money and they can actually go out there and lease a car or buy a car, they're still refusing to do so because the technology has changed significantly. So now you have the emergence of sharing services, right? Like Zipcar. You have technology that keeps you connected. Uber, exactly. So people are now moving into areas that aren't necessarily suburban. The cul-de-sac is no longer desirable to millennials. They want to live in communities where they can walk around, where they don't necessarily need a car. So case in point, when Zipcar was founded in 2000, the average price for a gallon of gasoline was $1.50 and iPhones didn't exist. Since then, it has become the world's largest car sharing company with some 700,000 members. So people are using Zipcars now. They're using Uber. They're walking. They're using public transportation. This is a cheaper way to do things, but also they kind of like the simplicity that goes along with that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just also going to say, because so many people are so obsessed with technology that there just haven't been the leaps and bounds in technology to get them excited. So I know a lot of people are like, wait for the Google car. It's just like we're still using a ton of gas, even if it's a hybrid. And it's just not where anyone wants it to be, where they can get excited about shelling out 30 grand for a car.
I know, it's crazy. If economists and politicians are basing the entire economy on what millennials are spending money on, which they should, right? But if it has to do with buying cars or buying houses and nothing more, then you're screwed. You need to come up with a better plan.